Gone in 60 seconds was a headline that we were toying with. I remember it well. Back at our old base, back in August 2010, when Martin O'Neill stormed out. Was it unexpectedly? Possibly so. Well, actually, I think we all expected him to leave because the fault lines and the fractious relationship was only widening into a chasm as the months ticked by, as his relationship with Randy Lerner and Paul Faulkner and the Villa board deteriorated. But it was just the timing of it. It was 8 days before the start of the season, I think, and it was. I don't think it was a deliberate act of sabotage, but I think it was very much of the chance of I'm going to leave and ensure that my successor doesn't have the time or the tools or the preparation to make a good job of this. It was the sale of James Milner that was a cause of the conflict, and the reason we were toying with this gone in 60 seconds headline was because I'd heard in the days following O'Neill's departure, I'd heard that it was very much a blunt gone into Paul Faulkner's office, kind of almost handed in his notice verbally, and then gone straight out again, with Paul Faulkner kind of looking kind of open mouthed, wondering what's just gone on there. Now we all know what happened following that. First of all, I got Radio BBC Belfast onto me for the first and last time ever in my life to try and make sense of it. But over and above that, it set in motion a chain of events and a number of years that saw Aston Villa go from Champions League contenders to Championship also-rans for a couple of seasons. It did start with O'Neill. O'Neill can't take all of the blame, but him leaving did, like I say, set in motion a miserable decline in Aston Villa's history, which we're only just now, in the end of 2019, seeing Aston Villa escape from. A football pitch on a sunny afternoon in the middle of Stourport is probably not where you'd associate with great sporting stories being told and unfolding, but that's what happened when Stilian Petrov tried so desperately hard to make his playing comeback for Aston Villa. I remember being at that game. I think I was live blogging it on my mobile phone, perched on a wheelie bin. It was such an outpouring of emotion. At the end of that match, I remember Villa fans swamping Stan Petrov on the pitch, kind of just to have their photos taken, just to give him a pat on the back, a hug. You know, blessing the poor guy was kind of blowing, to be honest, because if you consider the Petrov story, what he'd been through, that horrible illness and disease, that he showed such a desire and a determination and a real good nature to battle through. I remember being at Bodymore on the afternoon that Alex McLeish delivered the news that Stan Petrov had got leukemia. We'd just been given Alex McLeish a battering in that press conference a couple of moments earlier because Villa was struggling that season, and to his credit, McLeish took that on his shoulders, came back in the room 15 minutes later and delivered this news. We all know what happened after that. It epitomised what Aston Villa's like as a family, what football's like as a family. Those 19th minute salutes to who is a bona fide club legend. Now, perhaps didn't always get the credit he deserved as a footballer, but as a bloke, as an inspiration and as a hero, I was proud of Stan Petrov, and still am proud of Stan Petrov, and proud of the way that Aston Villa supported him and his family to get through such a horrible time. What a winker. What an absolute winker. Fabian Delph's face appearing on the scoreboard at Villa Park at half-time of the FA Cup game against Bournemouth. You know, we were told then he'd signed a new contract. You know, one of the absolute rising stars of English football at that time had pledged his future and commitment to Aston Villa. What we weren't told then was that contract included a very meagre, measly buyout clause for one of the rising stars of English football at that time. Fast forward to the summer months when Villa are away on tour. Delph has played his part in getting Villa not only to safety but to the FA Cup final. Tim Sherwood has breathed fresh life into a football club that up until that point was on its arse. We were looking forward with excitement. Fabian Delph, Christian Benteke, a rising Jack Grealish. It was going to be an exciting summer, especially with the exciting transfers that the transfer committee had got planned for us. It wasn't to be. Fabian Delph, we've all seen the gif, haven't we, of Grandad Simpson when he comes in the door, puts his coat on the hook, forgets where he is, takes it back off and disappears again. Fabian Delph epitomised that when he decided that, I'm here to stay, I love Aston Villa, I'm your man, I'm a happy winker. Next minute, he'd painted himself as a snake, only seen with Steve Hodge in the 80s, probably when Paul Tate comes back to Villa Park anytime, or when Robbie Savage comes to Villa Park. Turned himself into a hated figure. I don't think people begrudged him leaving, but it was just the kind of, the fake badge kissing and, yes, I'm here to stay, and then the next minute, nope, you're not. So next time we returned to Villa Park, load of inflatable snakes, loads of hissing noises, and Villa Park made it quite clear what they thought of what ended up being an embarrassing transfer U-turn by Fabian Delph. If Steve Jobs of Apple fame was still with us, he probably would have by now invented an iPhone that allowed you to tweet with your buttocks. Fortunately, Jolene Lescott, the supposed bored Villa fan, managed to devise that himself. Imagine, you don't need to picture the scene, you were all there. A 6-0 defeat at Villa Park to Liverpool on Valentine's Day, the Valentine's Day massacre. Even Toure scored, which I think the Liverpool fans were chanting that day. It was horrible. It was grim. It was 90 minutes that summed up a shocking, desperate, embarrassing, humiliating season for Aston Villa Football Club. So, if you're part of that, if you're a defender who's been turned inside out and, to use very slangy parlance, torn a new one that afternoon, if you're that defender, you probably just want to kind of slip away, go back to your gated mansion and, have your protein shake and go to bed. No, Jolene Lescott thought it would be a good idea to tweet a picture of a flash. Was it a Lamborghini or a Mercedes? I'm not a car man. It was certainly something a little bit more grand than my Vauxhall Astra. It was horrible. I think he tried to kind of thread together some kind of mediocre, miserable excuse, but it just isn't the done thing when the Villa fan base is feeling so down on itself and so down on their football club to kind of flaunt a top of the range Mercedes at them within 20 minutes, half an hour of the final whistle. To me, that was the moment that summed up that relegation season more than any other. We want you out. Randy Lerner out. I just don't think you understand. From European nights to relegation fights, we want Randy Lerner out. That was a song that grew in terms of regularity, that grew in terms of volume, and that grew in terms of venom as it became clear that the American dream of Randy Lerner catapulting Villa back to those glory days of the early 80s was actually becoming a nightmare. It really surfaced when Villa fans, who, like most football fans to be honest, kind of have their moans on Twitter, have their moans on the radio phone-ins and have their moans in the pub, but don't actually take action. This was such a crisis for Villa that Villa mobilised as a fan base. They arranged a protest. I remember walking from the Holt pub back to the Trinity Road entrance, kind of witnessing this protest, and it was just an outpouring of, come on, if you don't care like you said that you care, get out of our club, give somebody else a chance, give somebody the chance to really kind of live the dream that you've promised us. It was Villa fans in action more than I've seen, probably probably with the exception of the McLeish protest. It was Villa fans saying, if somebody else isn't going to take charge of our club, we are. We all know what happened. It wasn't too long after before we had another false dream with Tony Jarr coming in. Eventually, we've got back on an even keel with Wes Edens and Nassif Sawiris, but that to me was a pivotal moment in the changing of the guard that has finally allowed Villa fans to dare to dream once again. There's an image from the end of Aston Villa's playoff final defeat to Fulham, and it's an image of Tony Jarr sitting all alone in a packed stadium. How do you manage to be all alone in a packed stadium? But he must have felt like he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him up, as did most Villa fans, to be honest. Villa had lost the richest game in football. From a Villa fan point of view, it was the fact that they were marooned in the Championship for another season. For Tony Jarr, losing the richest game of football meant losing the biggest gamble at the casino that you've ever seen. We didn't realise when we looked at that image of Tony Jaa how much of a cost that defeat had come at, but we did begin to realise in the coming weeks and months. It wasn't long before we heard stories about unpaid tax bills. We were even hearing stories about players taking their own packed lunch to Bodymore Heath because catering bills were cut. I mean, they should take their own packed lunch anyway, to be honest. Who can't get some salmon sandwiches wrapped in tin foil and a Kit Kat? But I digress. The thing was that we realised then in Tony Jaa's expression and in what unfolded subsequently that this guy who came in saying he'd got a 5-year plan to make Villa bigger than Barcelona was about to exercise a 5-year plan that could make Aston Villa smaller than Pelsall Villa. It was a shocker. It was a really, really, really grim moment that Villa were closer to the brink than they've been in their rich, illustrious history. And if it hadn't have been for the cavalry arriving in terms of Wes Edens and Nassif Sawiris, who knows what state Aston Villa would be in. The big learning lesson from that whole episode was you don't gamble. You don't gamble to that extent with Aston Villa. Villa fans would rather have a football club to support, even if it meant another year or another 2 in the Championship, than their pride and joy, something they work hard every week to support, just been disappearing without a trace. It really was on the brink, and I still can't forgive Tony Jaa and the people around him for gambling with our football club like that. If I'd have been born in a family where I knew sometime soon I'd probably be sitting on the throne, I could be chauffeured around the world to meet some of the most fascinating people in some of the best hotels, I'd probably been grinning from ear to ear like Prince George was at Carrow Road. I think Prince George is one of our own. Now, you know, he might have blue blood rather than claret and blue blood by the fact of his upbringing. But what a fantastic story that Aston Villa is a football club of a big enough scale to have a rise of celebrity fans. I remember when Nigel Kennedy, a long-forgotten violinist, used to be Aston Villa's #1 celebrity fan. In the last decade, despite it being a very, very bleak decade in Aston Villa's history, not only have we had Prince William and Prince George as Villa fans, we've had Tom Hanks, the A-list Hollywood megastar, declaring his love for Aston Villa. We've even had David Cameron, he who is to blame for the Brexit mess we all find ourselves in, without me getting too political. We even had David Cameron declaring his undying love to the Claret and Blues. He couldn't remember which set of Claret and Blues, admittedly, didn't know whether it was Aston Villa or West Ham. But the point that I'm making is Aston Villa are a big business.
Where you can support Man United, the Windies and Team GB all at the same time. Of course, I'd rather you supported West Ham.
You've said, I think, before that to govern is to choose. Do you choose West Ham or do you choose Villa?
Sorry, I had what Natalie would describe as a brain fade. I'm a Villa fan. I don't know what happened to me. I must be overcome by something this morning.
It's these moments, even during the bleak times, that remind you, yeah, decent, aren't they? Decent, aren't they, Aston Villa? A really big deal. I can't remember which of the saviours it was directed at, but it was a balmy summer night outside Warsaw's Banksy Stadium, of all places. It might have been Naz, it might have been Wes, but I just remember the 2 new owners who had just sealed the deal for Aston Villa that very day, or certainly within 48 hours. There was a fan who kind of, as they jumped out of their blacked out windows Mercedes, a fan made a beeline for them and he said, find us a loophole, Wes, find us a loophole, Naz. They did find a loophole. They found a way to bring Villa back from the brink of financial fair play sanctions. Not only that, they found a way to get Dean Smith through the door. They found a way to energise a season that we thought could have ended in despair, and they turned it into a promotion season. Now, I'm sure Nassif Sawiris and Wesley Edens won't want to take credit for it. You know, they probably lean more towards the Randy Lerner sit in the background style of ownership than they do the Tony Jaa tweet every single moment style of ownership. But let's not mistake that Aston Villa's balance sheets of the last 10 years have been an absolute disaster. Now, from the twin forces of having these 2 guys who are showing us that they care and let's not get too carried away because it's early days, but they've invested, they've saved this football club, and they've been able to bring about a set of circumstances that have got Villa back in the Premier League. That should give Villa's longer-term outlook, make Villa's longer-term outlook a lot healthier. So the moment those guys were saluted and adored as they got out of those cars at Warsaw was a massive turning point in this club's modern history. I don't often blag my way into the posh seats at Villa Park, but on this occasion I was being wined and dined at the expense of Villa's former sponsors 32 Red when my phone rang, and it was one of our photographers, Tim Eastoe. "Are you working, Matt? Are you working?" "Well, not strictly. I'm part of the Prawn Sandwich Brigade." He said, "Well, I've got a great picture. Someone's just wanged a cabbage at Steve Bruce." "Tim, have you been drinking?" "No, someone has just wanged a cabbage at Steve Bruce. I've got the pictures of it." I'm like, okay, this is an absolutely brilliant story. Now, forgive me the journalist instincts taking over from the fan instincts or the reasonable human being instincts. I should have actually said, that's a step too far. We know that Steve Bruce has served his time here, but that's a step too far. You don't assault people with any kind of vegetables, whether it's sprouts, whether it's cabbages, whether it's carrots. I said, "Tim, we'll run this story, but we need you to send the picture. I can't run this story without the picture of the cabbage." Eventually, as the match has gone on, this was the Preston game that proved to be Steve Bruce's last game. Random game, fans didn't know whether to cheer goals or whether to boo Bruce. Absolute crazy scenes inside Villa Park. Eventually this cabbage picture dropped on my email in the last minutes of the game, probably around the time that Glenn Whelan was missing the penalty that ultimately cost Steve Bruce his job. It was bizarre. It looked like a cabbage that was about to perform on Stars in Their Eyes. It was set in front of this glitzy backdrop of one of the advertising boards, and we just thought, it sums it up. It sums up what Aston Villa has become and what the relationship with Steve Bruce has become. As we know, not only was he out of the door and sacked the following day, but all the coverage and all the stories were dominated by this one image of a cabbage. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. When Neil Diamond was belting out his classic hit during his heyday, I can't envisage that he could have ever thought that John McGinn, Jack Grealish, Tyrone Mings would be singing it from a Wembley hotel several decades later. Sweet Caroline came to epitomise Aston Villa's successful season. I think it originally emerged in the away dressing room at the Hawthorns after Villa had put away West Brom on penalties to get through to the playoff final. But it's become an anthem, and I think those scenes in the Wembley hotel, on the balcony, at Wembley itself, were just kind of such an outpouring of euphoria. I mean, it's all relative. Filling up there with emotion. It's all relative. Football fans will say, "Oh, Villa fans don't know they were born. You know, we've had worse stories than that." But it's been pretty grim from a Villa fan point of view for 10 years, realising what Villa were capable of to what they became. So when Dean Smith and Jack Grealish and John McGinn and Tyrone Mings could go through the whole team, when they actually gave us our Villa back by delivering a promotion season, a record-breaking win of games, got to the final and didn't pull the rug this time. It was such a brilliant moment. I remember being at Wembley with my lad. It's been a hard sell with my lad over 10 years, getting him to be a Villa fan. A little glory hunter thinks, "Can I have a Man City shirt, Dad? Can I have a Liverpool shirt?" Nope, you can't. You're having a Villa shirt. You can wear a Villa shirt with pride now. And it was that Wembley moment that was the culmination of a challenging journey. If only I could carry a tune, I'd sing Sweet Caroline for you now, but I'm not going to. But what a tune, what a moment, what a season, what a way to remind us all that Aston Villa are back. What a tune. Sound like I'm on Desert Island Discs.